We are back. It's Cowan and Shannon with you as per usual. And today with AJ Perez of Front Office Sports, who more than anything else follows sports business, for lack of a better term. Is that a fair assessment, AJ?
Yeah. Sports business. I'm not really the stock analyst kind of reporter, but more on the investigative side. But pretty much anything that deals with sports and money.
Yeah. Speaking of money, the Washington Commanders are allegedly for sale. First of all, do you think they'll actually be sold?
Yeah, I think it's too far down the road at this point. There's not 24 votes to remove Dan Snyder at this juncture. We are about 5 weeks away from the next owners meeting. That's what I've reported, and others have kind of followed up on that. We expect to have an announcement by then. We're down to one real person, one real bidder, and that's Josh Harris, who owns the Devils and the Sixers. And his group has Magic Johnson, Mitchell Rales, who also grew up in the DC area. He's also a billionaire, just like Josh Harris is. And we're going to probably have a couple other names come out, either right before it's announced. It'll be Josh Harris, or right after. There's really nobody else at this point. I think Dan Snyder's looking for other bidders, but I think right now it's just Josh Harris. I think that's the only. I mean, my sources have been telling me for weeks that he's the only legit candidate.
What happened to Jeff Bezos?
That's tough. I mean, it was we don't know exactly when he hired the banking firm to kind of lead the sale. It was the sale of the Commanders, the potential sale, I should say, was it began in November, and it's kind of progressed slowly. Because I wrote a story in February of 2021 where his lawyer reached out about a 40% stake in the back when they were the Washington football team. There was a 40% stake, a big chunk of the team for sale. Three co-owners wanted to get out. They had issues with Dan Snyder, like a lot of other people do. They tried to sell it to a group out of California that was blocked by Snyder since he had right of first refusal. Set up a lawsuit, and eventually the NFL allowed him to take out Dan Snyder to take out more debt. He paid about $900 million for the 40%, which is the best deal in NFL history, since the team's valued at well over $5.5 billion. So they got a 40% chunk for under $1 billion. But that also caused Dan Snyder issues. He financed half of that, $450 million, and he already had about $500 million in debt already. So now the debt's around $1 billion, if not a little higher than $1 billion. It's one of the many reasons why Dan Snyder's going to be selling the team.
Well, I was going to say, he'll make a bunch of money off of this deal, but is he selling because of economics, or is he selling because he's being squeezed out?
I would say it's a combination of things. I mean, if you look at the social feed, any of the social feeds for the Washington Commanders, they could post the most innocuous or upbeat thing in the world, and they'll get the first 30 replies are going to be just slamming Dan Snyder, slamming the team name, slamming everything. And and the people who are there now, they weren't the people that caused the problems that led to the Washington Post reporting almost 3 years ago that led to all these investigations. Those people are all gone. The only people left are Dan Snyder and his wife Tanya, because Tanya didn't have much of a role during the toxic workplace, the years and years of toxic workplace problems. That Tanya wasn't really part of, she was around, but she didn't have an official title. Now she's the co-CEO, and she has been for 2 years. So there's just no turning this around. It's beyond the NFL owners being mad at them, because there's still it's never happened in the NFL. It's happened in other sports. Obviously Don Sterling, Frank McCourt, Mark Schott. But that's never happened in the NFL, and the NFL doesn't want to set a precedent. These teams are so valuable that they don't want to 5 years down the road, if their local newspaper goes after him. And I'm saying the Washington Post is totally accurate, and I think they did a lot of great work, and it started the whole ball rolling. So credit to the Washington Post. But that's another reason why Dan Snyder didn't want to sell to Jeff Bezos. Yeah, because of the Washington Post. But yeah, it's just the media environment here, and it's a fan environment. The stadium's 20,000 seats, has 20,000 fewer seats than right after Dan bought the team. It's the TV market. They're like 20th in local TV ratings. They were top 3 for decades. They're the bottom 1 or 2 teams in attendance when they were in the top 3 for decades. And it's just there's just too much going on. There's too much inertia now for him to turn back. Now he could, and then then we really start talking about removal. The owners all along, including trying to talk up Jeff Bezos to Dan Snyder, the owners, a few owners have, the owners all along have just preferred Dan just to read the room and just sell the team.
Do you have
Is
any sense of who those owners are? Is it the typical guys, Bob Kraft, Jerry Jones, that type of group?
Yeah, those are two. There's those definitely Jerry Jones and Bob Kraft. Bob Kraft actually spoke publicly about supporting getting Bezos in as an owner. Jerry Jones is obviously one of the top power brokers in the league. But there's been others, and I think everybody talks. Oh well, they'll just wait for Seattle, or Bezos just wait for Seattle. There's no guarantees the Seattle Seahawks are going to go on the market. NFL teams don't go on the market a lot. Now we had back-to-back years, but before that, we had to go back to 2017 with the Carolina Panthers. So it's it doesn't happen that often. And this was a marquee franchise here in DC. It wasn't the Cowboys, but they were mentioned in the same breath. It's just sad to see how far it's fallen. And I've only been here for 17 years, but but my sixth grade teacher was a Commanders before they were the Commanders, the old name with the R. Yeah, and so I was a fan because when they won, I didn't get homework the next week. So it was So it was one of the we had Joe Gibbs, the Hogs, and all going back, and it's been 23 years, 24 years almost of just heartache for the fans.
Well, as an outsider looking in, I wonder, is this team really worth $5.5 billion?
You're buying what they were and what they should be. That's the whole thing. You're buying a fixer-upper, and you're spending probably around $6, if not a little above $6 billion for a fixer-upper franchise. You have to spend $3 to $4 billion after you buy the team to build a stadium. Granted, you'll probably get some local support, some public money from taxes, but it's not guaranteed. And you don't know where that's going to be. I mean, they tried here in Virginia. Dan Snyder tried. All he could get was ended up getting nothing. But that bill stalled last year here in our state legislature. There was no appetite to fund a Dan Snyder-owned team to build a stadium. Will that change with the new owners? Likely, but still, you're still talking about billionaires asking for government money. And I think that's especially in this area. There are other parts of the nation where it's a lot easier to get public money for a stadium. You got over $1 billion in Buffalo between the county and the state, to build that stadium. It'll be a state-owned, government-owned stadium anyway. But where the Pagulas don't have to kick in all that much money to build it. But this is going to be, and there's the Nashville, you got the Titans. About a year ago, we didn't even know they needed a new stadium. Right. They were going to upgrade, and they're getting over $1 billion in public subsidies. And Vegas got a couple $100 million. That SoFi didn't have much. Obviously, every time you build a stadium, you get some breaks, either tax breaks or infrastructure costs to build the roads up and stuff around it. But this is a really tough area to sell publicly financed stadium. And a lot of it is just the not in my backyard thing. No one wants this around them. That includes the old RFK site in DC. That includes pretty much that's why the most straightforward path is probably going to be building a stadium next to FedEx Field. I don't think it's not the most preferable. It's not the sexiest, but that's the most straightforward path.